Good morning, folks. Welcome back to Collaboration Conversations. So glad that you're here with us this morning. My co-host Pearl Cox is out today, so we have a wonderful guest host today. And my guest host is Kevin McNulty, and Kevin is a speaker, a coach, an author, and I'm really curious about this to some degree, a soft skills expert. I think that's something we all can use. Good morning, Kevin. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Regina. Thank you so much for having me. This is
Oh,
fun.
it's a delight to have you as our guest co-host today.
Can I drink coffee while we talk?
You absolutely can drink coffee while we do this. So, Kevin, share with us a little bit about your journey. What's brought you to this place in your life, and who you're serving and why?
Well, um, it started back just a few years ago. Actually, I cut my teeth in the Air Force. So I spent 20 years in the military, in the US Air Force. And in that context, most of that career had a couple of different jobs, but most of it was involved in human relations education. So I essentially help commanders and managers, both military and civilian people, deal with people problems. So we would do things like, climate assessments, go into organizations. I'm talking about not maybe some of the employee engagement surveys that you see now. I mean, these were full blown assessments where we would start off with a survey, much like an employee engagement survey. And then we'd go in and do focus groups. We would do one on one interviews. I mean, it was just this full 30-day process. And our job was to essentially tell the commander, how things are going with respect to their people in their organizations. Of course, because commanders are there to run squadrons in the Air Force, to run their organizations, honestly, to fight and win wars. So
Yeah,
imagine that you're having people problems along the way. People are not getting
not a
along. I
good
mean,
thing.
not a good thing. This was a big deal in Vietnam. They had a lot of
Sure.
race relations problems and caused a lot of harm in the battle. So in any event, spent 20 years in the Air Force, got out in 2000, moved, my wife and I, we moved from, who is also a fellow veteran, moved from California to Nashville with our two young daughters and started building our practices. She went into teaching music, and I into the speaking and consulting coaching industry. And here we are 20 years later, still surviving.
Wow. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to both of you for your service to our
Thank you.
country. We
Thank,
appreciate that so very much.
thank you.
My husband was a Marine, so we, you know,
Very
we
nice.
we definitely appreciate you.
Thank you.
Um, awesome. So, and wow, 20 years in the Air Force,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
Yeah.
So
You know,
that,
yeah.
go ahead, please.
Well,
Go
no, I
ahead.
was just going to say it was an interesting it was an interesting place to cut your teeth in, especially if you talk about soft skills or human relations or any of the softer skills, if you will. And I suppose your audience knows, but soft skills are basically people skills. We use that term inside, and you already know this inside of this business to describe those that are separate from technical skills. So in any
Right.
event, I had a different take on how things are when I went into this business of coaching, consulting, training,
Yeah.
speaking, and that was that one, in my business, we always had to tell whomever we were speaking to, but primarily, let's just say the commander, whether it was a squadron commander or the wing commander, who was maybe the general, the colonel, and that oversaw the entire installation. We had to tell them the truth about what was going on, and it wasn't always easy.
Right.
So,
Or
so
pretty.
or pretty. No, that's exactly right. And then the second thing is that we believed in the mission, i.e., whatever the mission was, that's where our focus needed to be on the
Right.
mission. So then when I get out, and interacting with the private sector, of course, I had to figure out a different way to communicate with them because the truth wasn't always accepted.
Right.
Um, Not to suggest that private sector doesn't accept truth any less than, let's say, the military, but that's the culture in the military. Again, you can lose lives over not telling the truth about things that are
Exactly.
happening.
Yeah.
So, and anyway, I moved out. I came in 2000. I started this business and basically just evolved, I guess you could say, over time. to really focus on really personal growth and soft skills. And so that's what I'm doing a lot of now, speaking and coaching mostly.
Fantastic. Those soft skills are so often overlooked, but are so incredibly important to the success uh, of a person or of an organization.
Amen.
And one of the things that you said there about the difference between the delivery of that information,
Mm,
military versus private sector, I think in the military, ego is less of a challenge probably in that receiving of that information. Would that be a good way to put that?
well,
Or that
it,
in the private sector, it's that ego piece might be a little bit more of a challenge?
I think so, to some degree, maybe. Although there's still the presence of ego, but what I did notice, particular in retrospect in the military, is you had to ignore it more, whether it be your own or
Right,
you have to submit yourself,
exactly.
ignore it, whether it was your own or whether it was how you dealt with another person and their
Yeah,
ego. You
you
see, it
maybe
was
had to
just, yeah.
suppress it
Yeah,
a bit.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
whereas in the private sector, it's not as, I don't know, it depends, I guess.
yeah, yeah. I can see where that could be an issue.
Yes.
And it's humbling to bring someone in to look at your organization, and then that
Yes.
person says, "Oh, by the way, you're a
Mhm.
big part of the challenge."
You got it. You're exactly right, and I've had those encounters.
Yes. Oh, goodness. So tell us a little bit more about these soft skills, and we've just kind of lightly touched on them. Help us understand what more of these things are, and kind of what that starting place is in the development of those soft skills.
Oh, that's a great question. For starters, that I would suggest that somehow, some way that, let's just say, younger professionals ought to tackle soft skills earlier in life.
Mm,
Be it high school, be it college, and there's a lot out there, especially in this digital world. You can have access to a lot of different things, and I work with a fair amount of youth and speak to youth groups, colleges, and this, that, and the other. And I raised two kids, really three. My son from my first marriage, and teenagers and young people. They're just coming about, and their brains are still developing, and so the soft skills are not sort of front of mind as many would be. But
right,
those who become successful earlier in life, you know, it often has a lot to do with the soft skills. I mean, listen, you can be technically great at anything, but you can't get along with people, for instance,
yeah, yeah,
or you can't communicate ideas. So
right,
you're a boss, you're a manager, and you have, and you're, let's say, a controller, or um, or a CFO, and you have accountants and financial people that work for you, and you send them out to take on projects, and they come back and say, and you say, well, you got this all wrong, and they said, well, that's what you told us. Well, no, that's not what I told you, and this
but it's what
repeats
they
over and
understood.
over. That's correct. And so if
Yeah,
you can't convey these ideas, being a great technician isn't of great value to the organization, especially if it's a situation where you can't get along with people. Because
yeah,
I've seen many times over where professionals are highly valued because of their sales prowess or whatever the case might be. But they pissed off half the company as well, and nobody
exactly,
likes them. Nobody wants to interact
exactly.
with them, and so they start to
Yeah,
do this calculation and say, "Hey, we love you, but you're fired."
right, right. We can't
So
afford you.
you can't
You're,
afford. So
yeah,
absolutely. So the to answer your question, you start with younger people, and the younger professionals, start to learn some basic skills like communication. Of course, listening is the big one. Team building, teamwork, if you were, how to be within a team. how to collaborate, by the way, as we're
Right.
going to talk about. To me,
Yeah,
honestly, Regina, and you already know this, it's one of the most critical skills that a
it is.
person can bring to the table,
Yeah.
whatever juncture you're at in your career. So, so yeah, it's a critical issue. More and more are getting on board with it. More organizations and companies. I mean, I shouldn't say get on board with it. They've been doing it for a long time, but I think more and more organizations, people, leaders are seeing how critical and soft skills are to
Yeah.
their success.
I can completely relate. I remember when I had my staffing firm and I would have to
Mm,
bring IT people in periodically for something, and I hated doing it because they were so condescending to everyone because we didn't understand everything they understood,
mm,
and they had 0 people skills. And then my son-in-law, uh, has an IT degree, and I actually hired my daughter as well. They both ran departments that I mean, she started off as a receptionist and grew through the company
wow.
and ultimately before we closed our doors, I think she ran 3 different departments.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Not all at the same time, thank goodness, but he was our IT, ran our IT department. He literally was voted, by the rest of the staff at one point to be, just I don't remember what the term was, but they all fell in love with him, which is
Mm,
so unusual for an IT person
yeah.
because our experience was not that. But he honored every person that he interacted with and made them feel good.
Wow.
And it was just amazing to see that in an IT person because that had not been my experience at all.
Oh, that's
And so,
fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah, people that are in more of the sort of, I guess you could say, the technical, the highly technical, the scientific, even accounting, where there's so much, I guess you could say, left brain activity in.
yes,
It's
yes.
a funny thing. I get along with, for instance, engineers, scientists. I get along with them very, very well. I don't know why exactly, but it's almost as though we respect each other to the degree that they wish they had a little bit more of what I have, and I wished I had a little bit more of what they had,
There you
in the
go.
brains
Yeah,
department.
yeah,
And so it tends to be a nice thing. But I would say even the most uh, more mature professionals, they recognize their shortcomings when it comes to
yeah,
their soft skills and seek it out. I've had a number of, for instance, engineers, call me. And again, I don't think we need to say that this is not all engineers, all IT
no,
people. We
yeah,
already know that,
agreed.
but certainly they have a different mindset, a way of approaching things,
Yeah,
and it's a lot of what we want, as business owners and as a society. We need
yeah,
those technical, really super smart people, but we
exactly.
also need to be able to interact and collaborate with them.
Yeah, I know a young man he's in his mid-30s. In fact, yesterday was his birthday, and he's just brilliant. And I tell him when we talk, I say, I just would love to get inside of your brain and see how it works because he's just so
Exactly.
brilliant.
Well, I
You
mentioned.
mentioned, oh, go
Go ahead.
ahead,
No,
please.
I was gonna ask you a question,
Sure.
how collaboration works in your world, if you're dealing
Oh,
with
yeah.
profit acceleration or, scale in a business or whatever the case might be. How in real time do you collaborate or
Uh,
encourage collaboration, by the way?
and I consistently encourage collaboration. Yes. For me, it's a lot of being aware,
Mm,
becoming as aware as I can of the value that a particular person brings in terms of skill sets, resources, all of that, and thinking about who do I know that would benefit from an association with this person?
love that.
Who do I know that what this person brings to the table would be of value to them in growing their business or in their personal life or something of that nature? And just constantly thinking about, who could I introduce to whom? Who can help someone else? Where would this be a good partnership for someone else? And just always being receptive to that, which
Love
means you've
that.
got to listen, right? One of those soft skills, right?
That's right. That's
You've
right.
got to listen and listen with the intent of how can I serve?
Oh, love that.
Because collaboration is service
It
in
is
my
service.
mind. Yeah. Yeah.
That's fantastic, and I can see, and again, with respect to collaboration, we know that it is the bringing together of different people, with diverse mindsets, with diverse skills, with diverse intellects. I mean, all these other sorts of things, and
Yeah.
figuring out how can you have these different people come together and produce, be
Right.
productive. You see, and to your point, you're bringing these people together, oftentimes whether it's two or more, and when you bring them together, I suppose you're suggesting that they collaborate together, whatever it is on.
Yeah, whatever that is on. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the other thing is what we're doing today. Um, this is a way to enhance collaboration for you and anyone listening to our audience. I mean, anyone in our listening audience
Mhm.
who um, resonates with you and what you have to say
Mm.
today, that they can reach out to you because you don't always know who they are. However, if they comment, folks comment on the thread, and then we can reach back out to you.
That's right.
But there's an opportunity then to expand our world through this, to expand our associations. And so, as folks, as you and I are visiting today, and folks hear that, it's going to resonate with someone,
That's
and
100%.
then there's that opportunity for them to say, "Wow, I'd really like to meet Kevin. I think there's an opportunity for us to explore opportunities."
To
Forgive the
Yes.
double word there, but
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think there's, that there are opportunities to be explored with many individuals, and sometimes that exploration takes you nowhere other than you got to know a little bit about this person,
That's right.
but oftentimes it takes you somewhere.
That's right.
And you never know where that somewhere is going to be. You don't know
That's
what you
right.
have to be open to the possibilities.
Man, I love that. In fact, I love that phrase, "open to the possibilities." It's a beautiful phrase, to suggest to anybody in any context, in a meeting, in a
Yes.
mastermind group. I wanna throw this out, Regina, that about collaboration, and that first and foremost, I believe, collaboration, of course, is essentially a group of people coming together to communicate, to interact for the purposes of, for a common goal of some sort, whether it's a
Right.
project or whatever the case might be. But the other thing that I would say about collaboration is that it really begins with a mindset. Mindset is a term that's thrown out there a lot these days. So when I say mindset, I mean with the intention, with the attitude, with the mental approach, I guess, that I'm here to collaborate with you. So essentially, when you so kindly invited me on to co-host this with you, you didn't use the term, but it essentially meant the same thing, that you were asking me to come collaborate with
Yes.
you to have a conversation to produce meaningful, information to the listeners, the viewers.
Right.
You see?
Absolutely.
And so now
Absolutely.
imagine, Regina, that I came on, it could be about any topic. It doesn't have to be collaboration,
Right.
but God forbid it was collaboration. And I came on and just completely dominated the conversation, or I
It's not
disagreed with you
collaboration.
about
Right.
everything that you said.
Yeah.
That's correct. You see,
Yeah.
I think, I encourage the audience to think about this in any context, that you were to join a meeting, a group, a mastermind, a round table, whatever it is, and you behaved in such a way that people thought, "Geez, we ain't invite that guy back," you know?
Yeah.
And therein lies the need for the soft skill of learning how to be a collaborator, or learning
Yes.
how to collaborate. Do you agree?
Yes. I totally agree. And I want to come back also to that phrase about being open to the possibilities,
Mm.
because when you're in any kind of a collaborative group, a couple of things that come to
Mm.
one is you need to listen. And many of us are horrible communicators in terms of when we're in a conversation, we hear something in that conversation and we say, "Oh man, I want to respond to that." And we
Mm.
totally wipe out the rest of the conversation. We're not really listening to the conversation. Or we come into the conversation with a preconceived idea of what we're going to contribute to that conversation,
Yes.
which leaves you not listening and not open to possibilities because you're not hearing what that person has to offer. You're not hearing what they need because you're not listening. You're so intent on what you want to bring to the conversation instead of what can I take away from this conversation? And what can I add in value based on where the conversation is going? Being open to the possibilities instead of having a preconceived, this is what I want to make sure we cover today. This is what I want to make sure I interject into the conversation. They're gonna love me for my brilliance. That kind of thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. No, that's exactly right. And when you don't get people like that in a meeting, or you have someone who doesn't listen, who are
Yeah.
is constantly interrupting or whatever the case might be, I want to ask you then, how does it make you feel as a member of this group? I'm curious to I'm a sincere question.
Oh, you feel ignored. You feel undervalued, and you can see the
Yes.
almost arrogance, if you will, of that person who's assuming that role. And where there is arrogance, there is not listening.
Hmm.
There is not collaboration. Arrogance doesn't fit it well into collaboration.
And so then imagine you're sitting there in this group that you should be masterminding or brainstorming or communicating, collaborating. Where does if you're affected in the way that you just suggested about what you're thinking about the other person, where then is your mind in this
Yeah,
meeting?
speaking for myself, I tend to withdraw a bit, I think, and my mind is on the arrogance of that individual instead of on the subject matter that we should be dealing with. It
You know,
takes away.
and
Yeah,
likewise, and I think the vast majority of us probably would feel that way, that you're either like just slightly anywhere from slightly annoyed to seriously agitated to off
right.
track. You
Yeah,
see,
exactly.
how do you stay in this positive, collaborative mindset when you have a jerk sitting next to you who won't shut up?
Right. Yeah.
Or yeah, or yeah, I mean,
Or
there's some people that talk a lot like me, but or arrogant. I mean, it's
yeah,
just it's a difficult place to
not
have it.
respectful of the others in the
Yes,
group and what they have
yes,
to offer. And
yes.
not listening, again, not listening, not being open to the possibilities. And you've essentially cut yourself out of any collaborative opportunities by taking that role because nobody wants to work with you at that point. Nobody wants, I love the people I collaborate with. It's a joy to work with them. It's a joy to be involved in
Love it.
projects, and it fuels me and fuels my energy. And so, if I'm not going to choose to work with someone that I can't get along with.
I mean, it's not that complicated. I'm with you there. Let's throw out for our audience, different venues or forums, let's just say, that we might collaborate in, but we don't think about it
Mm,
being a collaborative activity. I'll start off.
okay.
Net Networking. You go to a chamber of commerce or some type of a networking event. Do you agree that there's a level of collaboration that's going on?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Particularly if you go in with the right mindset, going back to
Yes.
mindset. If you go in with the right mindset and you're prepared to explore, but to also be able to explain what you do in a way that gets people interested in what you are saying, um,
Fantastic.
opens the door for collaboration.
Yes.
Yeah,
What other forums? Just what we consider like regular meetings,
yeah,
corporate or business meetings.
right, right.
It
Yeah,
may not be strictly. Go ahead, please.
no, I was going to say I used to have, again, in my staffing firm, we would have management meetings where we would bring all managers of all the departments together, and I mean, it might be a usually a 2-day meeting. You know, you need some collaboration in there. You
Yes.
definitely, I mean, you need to tackle the big issues, but you need to do it in a collaborative way in order to get the most mileage out of it. Because when you're being collaborative, you're open to the possibilities and you see beyond what you can see personally. And the vision is, it's that 2 + 2 doesn't equals 4, maybe 2 + 2 equals 10. Uh, that exponential value that you get when you collaborate.
I love it. And to your point, when we think about your average business or corporate meeting or management meeting, you know, probably the manager oftentimes is at most fault for not what I this is my suggestion and my assertion that for not creating a collaborative environment.
Exactly.
That in fact, I challenge clients all the time, you know, about their meetings if they're leaders. Tell me about your
Right.
meetings. I've literally shadowed them to sit in on their meetings because
Right.
I'm working with them on their soft skills.
Yeah.
And I remember one meeting I was in, Regina. This was many years ago, so I'm safe to say this. I think a couple of people have retired since. And it was a high level meeting, it was higher end executives and
Right.
not C suites, but VPs, directors, so forth. So, anyways, so I was working with the organization, doing some culture change, some soft skills work, all this kind of stuff. And of course, I asked to be a part of the meeting. One of the big problem areas was, in fact, the head boss that they felt like, yeah, he's just very, very difficult to get along with and not collaborative. Just
Right.
autocratic, all these other sorts of things that we hear all the time. And so, I'd already had conversations with him. I was somewhat coaching him as we went through this process, and he was very, very friendly to me and all these sorts of things. But I was hearing really bad things on the other ends to all these other people that I'm interacting with. So, anyways, I asked about being in a meeting. I went to the meeting, and wow, it was a great meeting. And he apologized for cutting people off and all these other sorts of things. It was just a really nice meeting. And then we're leaving. I'm sitting on the outskirts of the meeting, not around the central table. I'm just
Right.
observing. And so, anyways, we're leaving. He left first, and there are probably about 12 of them, come behind him, and I'm with sort of the crowd. And one guy leaned over and said, I've never heard that person before saying please and
So
excuse
it's
me and
different
started to
behavior
cut.
because you were in the room.
Correct, correct, correct. That's just a funny anecdote. But one
Sure.
of the big problems is that he would come into these meetings and say, "Okay, here's what we got, and here's what you need to go do this." And I mean, just sort of
Yeah.
all this sort of thing. And I encouraged him. I said, "Well, what would it be like if you said, hey, here's a project that just has come in. Regina, I want to know what you think about it first."
Yeah. Yeah.
And now you've started a collaborative process. I mean, you agree?
Exactly. And then create, the style of leadership that he was exhibiting
Yes,
is what helps create those silos in our companies that make it really, I mean, they stunt the growth of a company when it's full of silos
100%
for
correct.
sure. The growth of the people and the growth of the company. So, yeah,
Ironically that you say that, and very, ironically, honestly, because that was one of their big issues that we were working on. That
yeah,
term popped up more than any
yeah,
other term, was how each of these departments and department heads began to silo and fight for
yeah,
information and
yeah,
hoard information and all these other sorts of
yeah.
things. Mhm.
I know I worked with an organization doing some team building for them some years ago, and that was
Mm,
one of the things that was really obvious in that was the silos, that kind of a thing. And it was an amazing transformation. I love doing team building work because it was just an amazing transformation in the responses post event after we've
mm.
gone through this. And I can't remember how long this process was that we've met like weekly or something with all of the team leaders and all the department heads. And anyway, but the feedback following the event of how communication had changed within their organization was just so rewarding to hear.
Oh, man, I can
Uh,
only imagine. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
No, that's fantastic.
oh,
I think of other venues, coaching is
hmm,
collaborative, right?
absolutely.
How about conflict resolution? Sitting
Oh,
down as a manager or person trying to
yeah,
resolve a complaint between two people and two departments, right? You agree?
yeah,
It's a
Oh,
collab
totally.
should be
Yeah.
a collaborative process.
May I
I
share
think
another story with you
please.
and with our audience? So, in my staffing firm, one of the things that was key to our success was really understanding the people that we had working for us, and we
Mm,
used a program, a personality
mm.
program that was over 90% predictive of success in most
Oh my.
cases, based on understanding the requirements of the job and understanding who that person was. And we looked at 13 innate personality characteristics with it. And then from those 13 scales, we could evaluate over 50 performance factors.
Wow.
So we had, my business partner and I had gathered everybody. We'd taken them all out to dinner this, I don't know what day of the week it was. Let's say it was Wednesday. We took them out to dinner Wednesday night and we sat around and we shared everybody's profiles, both their Myers-Briggs and this other profile, the Rembrandt Advantage, the
Mm,
Rembrandt portrait. And they had this just wonderful evening of getting to know one another, enhancing collaboration, right? Getting to really understand who each person was and what they brought to the position. So the next morning, my business partner calls me and says, "You want to meet for breakfast?" I said, "Sure." So we went to the same restaurant that we'd been at the night before. And in the middle of breakfast, I get a phone call saying, "We just had a cat fight." I'm like, "What? No, you didn't. That doesn't happen in my company. No." So we left
oh, that's
breakfast. We went
funny.
we went back to the office and we brought the two gals in who had the conflict and we took them into the conference room and I put both of their profiles, their scores, their 13 scores up on the whiteboard. And it was clearly obvious where the conflict came from as we looked at their scores. But I told them, I said, you can both bring a champion into the room with you. You can bring somebody who's on staff that you know loves and trusts you and has your best interests at heart, so that if you can't speak up for yourself, they can speak up for you. And so, but then I told them, we're either going to walk out of here, having resolved this, or one or both of you are going to be leaving, walking down the road, kicking rocks, because that's not the kind of behavior we're going to have in our company, period. So
Oh my
I
gosh.
have a picture of them standing at the counter following that meeting, giving each other a hug. Now,
Oh
did it
man.
resolve all their issues? No, but they now
Yeah.
understood what it was that caused the trigger. And it was really, truly the way they approached problems. And they were at opposite ends of the scale. They were also at opposite ends of the scale on not only on problem solving, but in terms of assertiveness and aggression. And it just flared, they just didn't understand each other enough. But we made sure that in that conference room that day, they understood more about each other. And
Wow.
they walked away and
Oh,
yeah, like
what
I
a
said,
great
did it
story.
resolve all conflicts? No, but it eliminated hostile conflicts. They might still
Yeah.
have some issues in terms of understanding one another at times because they had to get collaborative. They had to listen to the other person. They had to get out of their own comfort zone and accept how somebody else approached the problem.
Wow, that's a great story, really. And you also remind me of this idea, speaking of other uh, sort of forums or situations where collaboration is not necessarily seen as collaboration, is to your point, listening.
Yeah.
And you might think, okay, how's listening collaborative? There's and you may be familiar with this. There's different forms of listening, in the soft skills world. One is, of course, active listening. The other one is what we call empathic listening. And empathic listening is the idea that you're speaking, and my role in listening is not just to kind of hear what you're saying and respond, but to make sure that I really understand what you're saying, to get clarity around that. So let's say
Yes.
we are having a bit of a difficult discussion or even an argument, and I could just hear you say something and then fire back at you. Oh, so you're basically saying I'm an idiot. Is that what you're saying? And you're saying, no, that's not what I said.
Yeah.
You see, I mean, this is how the
Yeah.
conversation goes, rather
Right.
than if I use more empathic listening, which is an incredible soft skill, and I say, Regina, you know, if I understand what you're saying that the fact that when I did this, that it really bothered you and that it caused you to feel misunderstood, devalued, and really made you feel bad. Is that what you're saying? You see, and of course,
Exactly.
then the person would respond, "Oh, that's collaborative. That's a collaborative
It is.
conversation. I'm asking questions. We're trying to clarify, understand." And
Right.
again, I think part of the point here, by the way, how about Sunday school? There's a good one for you. So I ran a Sunday school for about 10 years and I collaborated. I used to begin, especially if there was somebody new that would come in, I would say, I would correct people and say, first of all, when they say, Kevin's our leader, I'd say, no, Kevin's not your leader. Kevin's the facilitator of this group.
There you go.
I would
There you
correct
go.
them every time. I said, I'm not a leader here. And then I would follow up and say, my, I come here to feed and be fed.
Right.
Think about that. Feed
Love
and be
that.
fed.
Feed and
That's
be
correct.
fed.
So in the context of these different forums and different situations where we don't think about collaboration, if we would approach it with a collaborative mindset and and then actually do some of the things to that cause collaboration, like
Right.
simply asking questions or listening in the way that I see that you listening, you're nodding with me, you're
Right.
collaborating with me, even with your nods, because I get that you're getting it. You see,
Exactly. Yes.
and I guess that's sort of my ultimate point is that it starts with a mindset, a desire, an approach to want to collaborate in just about any circumstance where there's two or more.
Yes.
You see,
And not to come in with the idea that you're going to dominate that
yeah,
conversation because that's not listening.
it's not
It's not
listening,
listening.
nor
And
is
it
it
closes,
collaborating.
yeah, it's not collaborating and it closes off those possibilities that could be amazing that come out of that.
Amazing. Oh, you're so
Amazing.
right about that.
Yeah. Ah, this is so good, Kevin. You've shared such golden nuggets here today
Likewise.
and elevated our thinking about collaboration. So appreciate that so very
No,
much. I'm still
absolutely.
processing. I'm an internal processor, so if I get quiet,
Well,
it means I'm processing.
perhaps that's true, but you're an excellent collaborator and conversationalist. I say that
Thank you.
sincerely. Yeah, you make it very
Thank
easy. By the way,
Good.
that's another important point, isn't it?
It is, isn't
Is
it?
that you can stimulate conversation in other
Yes,
people who may not otherwise, which I know that you are obviously very skilled communicator, but there are people who are not as skilled, but you can stimulate that by collaborative conversations, if you will.
exactly. And some of that too, we in terms of introversion and extroversion. So
Mm.
on the Myers-Briggs scale, I'm 50-50 on introvert
Oh,
extrovert.
yeah,
I
interesting.
love doing the dog and pony show, as I call it, but I also love my me time, right?
Okay. Yes.
But
I
it also another factor of introversion and extroversion that a lot of people don't necessarily associate it with is where you process. Extroverts process as it comes out of their mouth. What that sentence starts as is something completely different when it finishes coming
how
out of their mouth because
fascinating.
they're processing as they go. Introverts pause and process internally. And so that can
Fascinating.
be an issue in communication sometimes when that introvert is, oh, you're not listening to me. No, I'm processing so that I can respond. So that's a piece of introversion and extroversion that most people don't get.
That is a nugget there. I honestly did not know that about how introverts versus extroverts, process information, and you can immediately see where that could stump conversations. You
Absolutely.
know,
Absolutely.
extroverts just throw out whatever comes out, right? And
Yeah.
you're like,
Yeah.
"What did you
And it
just say?"
changes as it's tumbling
Yeah,
out.
yes. And so
you
they
know?
you may need to ask for more clarification, whereas
Yeah.
as you're saying, introverts, you may want to just allow for that pause, that
Yes.
they're
Allow for
thinking.
the pause. They're thinking so that they can give you
How
a reasoned
fascinating.
response. Yeah. So yes, I love the personality parts. I absolutely loved doing that in my staffing firm. And in fact, we were a small regional company. We had 6 offices. One of our clients had over 200 offices across the states, and we served
Wow.
them in terms of personality assessments for their hires, for their
Wow.
internal employees. And so, yeah, it was a really fun part of my business.
Where would a person go to do sort of a, maybe to discover more about whether they're introvert or extrovert. I think it's a really important idea you're bringing up here that I can see, that immediately dawned on me when you said it about how it impacts collaboration,
Yeah,
communication.
yeah, absolutely. Um, the tool I like for that is the Myers-Briggs
Mm,
personality profile. Now, the other tool that I mentioned, I would also encourage people to explore, and that's the Rembrandt portrait, and it's put out by a company called Rembrandt Advantage
mm,
out of California. And it, like I said, it's over 90% predictive of success on the job. And I'm happy
mm,
to put a link in the comments for folks to check that out. And you take it online. They took Dr. Santo is the developer of it. He took the Gordon profile, which
mm,
was a 2.5 hour pen and paper profile years
mm-mm.
ago, and brought it to the computer world. So it takes less than 30 minutes to do it on the computer, and it is even more accurate than the
It's
Gordon profile
amazing.
was. And as I say, it's predictive of success on the job. It is a validated hiring tool, but it's also an extremely beneficial tool to understand about yourself or others. So let's talk about families for a moment and collaboration in a family.
Mm,
And we know that it can get strained at times, right? Especially between a husband and wife. There can, and over time, when the blush wears off, right? And over time, we can start to have some communication issues. And understanding how that other person functions, how they process, how they do these things can make all the difference. I
mm,
remember one day my husband was sitting at his desk working on something, very much an introvert, needing to process, but also needing to be singularly focused, not a multitasker at all. Not like me, I've got my hand in 100 things at once, right? But not him. And I was asking him a question. Well, for him to answer my question meant that he had to stop everything he was doing, focus on the question, and answer it.
wow.
And he was so tuned into what he was doing that he was not hearing me and not
Hmm.
answering my question. And when it finally got through to him, he got frustrated because he had to stop what he was doing, lose his train of thought on the work that he was doing.
I see.
So when we both took the Rembrandt portrait and we put our scores side by side, put our profiles side by side, and could see those differences, we could see how that was
How
negatively
interesting.
impacting our communication and how we could adjust to communicate more effectively. So
That
it's
is
a powerful
fantastic.
tool for that.
I'm
Yeah.
familiar with, I've heard of Rembrandt. I've never
Have
taken it.
you?
I've never used it, but I mean, it seems to me I've heard of it. Maybe I'm
I
thinking of
would be
something
happy
else,
to
but
introduce you to Dr. Santo.
you
He
know,
is
it,
he's a wonderful man.
is that
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's really fantastic, and you bring up such a very important idea there about um, about personalities and how they impact the way that we
Yeah.
collaborate and I would say, Regina, you know, just the knowledge that you just shared, but just the knowledge that two people have of each other's approach,
Yes.
may not change the entire situation, but can absolutely help. If I just
Absolutely.
understand, I mean, just this whole thing about love languages, for instance. I really haven't read in depth about it. I've read up on it and I understand a little bit
Right.
about it, but just the knowledge that, let's say, two people, man and woman, whatever, have different love languages, it
Yeah.
it just helps me understand and
Yep.
maybe consider something different, consider the possibilities.
Consider the possibilities.
Yeah.
You reminded me of an expression of my way or the highway. And so many
Mhm.
times we think ours is the only way. And the only
Mm.
way we get out of that is by understanding the other ways,
Mm.
understanding how someone else is different. Years ago, my husband was, he was working in the oil fields, and in the same week, 3 people sat him down and had a conversation with him about his my way or the highway. And
Oh,
it was me, his best friend, and my stepfather.
I
And
mean,
none of us knew that the
yeah.
others were doing anything, or, I
Wow.
mean, there had been no collaboration on our part at
Yeah,
all. And
yeah.
all in one week,
Yeah,
we
he
sat
might
him.
he probably saw that as divine intervention, like, "God, is it
He
you?"
did. He's like, okay, okay, I get the message.
That's good. That is just too good.
It is. It is. It was just like, it was so funny though, because none of us knew that the others were had any issue with it or were going to talk to him. But all in
Yeah.
the same week, we sat him down and had that conversation.
How funny. That's sort of
Uh,
an unsolicited 360, isn't it?
yeah, it really is. And I'm
Oh,
glad
that's
you brought
great.
up books. That my first book, and you can see it over my shoulder over there, the one in the middle, is Bulletproof Your Marriage.
Oh, my.
And it is all about communication. And,
Oh,
it's
wow.
about 5 different stages of the marriage and how communication changes in those and how we enhance our communication so that when the children leave home, we really still have a marriage. There's a
Yeah,
high percentage of divorces that happen in the empty nest as soon as the empty nest comes because they didn't nurture the marriage and the communication.
fascinating.
And so this book deals a lot with that. It's just the communication is so important. And again, that's a form of
Yeah,
collaboration, right?
it really is, and, oh, I love what you're saying there because that you're exactly right about that. Not just, you know, you're right that when and my wife and I, we just celebrated our 35th, and
Congratulations.
well, and we became empty nesters in very recent years, and, I can honestly say that we were always conscientious about this
Good.
notion and it's not unusual, and it's not even a bad thing where parents turn their focus to their
To the
kids,
children.
to their
Yeah.
children, raising them,
Yep.
and all of that sort of thing, and you kinda put your relationship to the side to
Yep.
a varying degrees. I can't say that my wife and I just necessarily did, but we mostly did, but we were very conscientious about the fact that we were doing that. It was
Right.
rather intentional, I guess you could say,
Right.
and we spoke about empty nesting before we empty nested, and, uh and we felt I'm gonna say the pressure. We felt the empty nesting, we felt the
Right.
difference, but it was not unfamiliar territory to us from the degree that we had been talking about it, we understood it,
Right.
and we forged through, we did some
Good.
things together, and it's gone rather smoothly, you know?
Excellent.
I'm not
That's
boasting
excellent.
about that other than to just say that I just commend you for the point that you're making about, you lose your way, you collaborate, in raising your kids,
Right.
but then you
Hopefully.
don't hopefully, correct, that's a good point.
Hopefully.
Uh, but
Not all do.
but you put your relationship aside and then suddenly show up and like, "Who are you anyways?" You know?
Yeah, and you have to make time for each other
Oh, man,
in those child rearing years. You
agree.
have to prioritize the relationship.
Mm.
A lot of times we are devoted to our partner, but not devoted to the relationship.
Oh, wow.
And you've got to have both.
That's a fascinating
You've got to
statement.
be devoted to the relationship as well. So the impetus for that
Mm.
book was a friend of mine was sharing with me that her good friend on her 42nd wedding anniversary, her husband came in and said, "Oh, by the way, we're getting a divorce." She had no idea her marriage was in such trouble.
Oh.
And my friend said to me, "I guess there's no such thing as a bulletproof marriage." And I went, "Wait a minute.
Oh,
No,
hello.
no, 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 no. There are things we can do to preserve our marriage, to make it last." And I was shocked at the data as I researched for that book at the number of marriages that just fall apart. And I think
It's
in
amazing.
most instances, it comes back to a lack of communication and a lack of, we start to think that the marriage is about our spouse making us happy. And that's not the purpose. You're to make them happy. And if you
Mm.
focus on you talked about reciprocity at one point earlier in our conversation.
Mhm.
If you make that person happy, that reciprocity kicks in and they're going to want to make you happy as well,
That's right.
you know?
That's right.
And it's the little things. It doesn't have to be big things. My husband, when he makes the bed in the morning, I'm usually out of the bedroom before him. And so before he's out of bed, we kind of on different schedules a little bit there. But when he makes the bed and I walk into the bedroom later to this lovely made bed, that is the biggest sign of love to me
Mm.
and communicates that love in a way that goes beyond words. What, Kevin?
I better start making the bed.
Make the bed. It just says, wow, he cared,
Yeah, yeah.
he,
Boy, that's true.
and
Yes.
it's a little
It's a
thing, right?
gesture. Yes.
Takes less than 2 minutes. Make the
Mhm.
bed.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. No, that's right. That's right. And you're right. And that's a contribution to the relationship, you you don't even have to say that you're doing it for the other person. It's
Yeah,
the gesture of doing it, and the other
right.
person receives it,
Yeah,
in a good
exactly.
way, and that's
Right,
that's a beautiful thing. You also have got me thinking about relationships, marriages and such that and this could apply to the workplace as well, is that we often get very preoccupied with things. And in this case, we're talking about preoccupied with our kids. And so you
right,
don't have to attend to the other person. You don't have to even like them that much, I guess, as long as, I mean, you might have sort of this undertone that's not very kind or very loving, but each are like, yeah, it's all in passing, and we're raising our kids, and I'm going to stick it out, you know, and I can do this as long as I'm preoccupied, with whatever it is, whatever your contribution is to raising the kids or maintaining the
right.
household or whatever the case might be. And maybe then to your point, the last child is out, and you're like, now I got to deal with this other person.
Yeah. And
I
that's
don't
where a
have
lot
anything
of
to distract
marriages
me.
fall apart. Yeah,
Interesting. Very
yeah.
interesting. Now I'm curious, Regina, so have you written 3 books then?
I actually have some other books that are not published yet. So I
Okay.
have one on grief, because my husband passed away in 2014,
Oh, I'm so
44
sorry.
years of marriage. I am
Wow.
happily remarried,
Very good. Nice.
but yeah, yeah, he passed
Okay.
away, and that led to writing a book on grief.
Mm.
And I just need to get it out. And my current husband is a poet, so we have put some of
How
his
interesting.
grief poetry into the book. So
Oh, very
it's
nice.
a
Wow.
collaborative. It's a
Collaborative.
collaborative book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then your other one there, 45 minutes. I can't quite
45
read it.
minute breakthroughs, how I find 10,000 dollars in any business in 45 minutes. And
Oh,
actually that's undergoing a rewrite, becoming how I find 100,000 in
oh,
any
you're
business
kidding
in
me. No, I'm
45
gonna be
minutes.
honest
No.
with you. If I saw that online, I'd roll my eyes.
So maybe I should leave both out there.
But
And
well, but
I
I trust,
actually don't put that one
I've gotten to
online.
know you a little bit and trust you here, though. I mean, really, 45 minutes? Let's talk.
45 minutes. I have access to a proprietary software that allows me to dive deep into a business and see
Oh, very interesting.
where there's profit, revenue, and increased value
Mm.
in their business, and then lay out a roadmap for them of how they're going to get that.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
fabulous. I've
And then
never heard
coach
of
them through
something
the
like that.
process.
Of course,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's fascinating, really. It
Yeah.
really is. And then what's the 3rd
And then
one?
the other one is generate cash flow quickly.
Mm,
Um, and the subtitle is 10 Secrets to Creating Profit Now.
very nice,
So,
And folks,
as you
by the
know,
way,
this,
this was not a setup. I was
no.
genuinely curious. I didn't know these books and was just curious about what they were. Very interesting. Yeah. So then if the marriage doesn't work, then you definitely need the other 2, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
One or both of you probably,
One or
if the
both.
lawyers have gotten a hold of the divorce, then both of
Then
you
you
are gonna
might
need
need the
it.
grief book.
Correct, and the grief book too, yeah. So, yeah. Too good. Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
this has been fun, Kevin.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
I've learned from you, and I think our audience has for sure.
Mm,
And folks, today we covered a lot of different aspects of collaboration. We didn't just keep it in the business world. We kept, we went out to our personal lives as well. It's all collaboration. It's all listening, being there for the other person, seeing how you can support them. That's a big part of collaboration is how can
mm.
I support you? As Jay Fazette says it, um, joint ventures, he talks about collaboration in joint ventures, and he says it's a game of I'll go first, meaning I'll support you
Oh,
first.
how interesting.
Yeah. And then that kicks in that reciprocity and they want to support you.
I would, Regina, and I don't know if you were about to make a closing thing there, but I would, if I may just throw out there a little
Please.
challenge to your viewers, and that is that sometime today or tomorrow, but I challenge you to do it today because today is today or now. Approach, whether it be a person at a coffee shop or at a network or at a meeting, approach that conversation with a collaborative mindset. Part of it
Absolutely.
is what you just said, the desire to support or help the other person.
Right?
But the other part is approaching it with questions, with interest, with collaborating inside of the conversation. Just approach it with simply that mindset. And
Yeah.
I'd be curious. I think people ought to come back to wherever
Would
you post this
love
on like
to.
this and
Yes.
to tell you how that worked out.
Would love to hear that from you folks. Please take him up on that challenge. That's an awesome challenge. Begin the work of learning how to collaborate more effectively. You may already do
Mhm.
collaborations, but see how you can do them even more effectively
Mm,
and the difference it will make in your life and
100%.
in the lives of others.
Yes.
Anybody who knows me knows that I'm all about the ripple effect.
Mhm.
How can I impact someone today who is going to impact other lives? And we create that ripple around the world. So,
Mm.
yeah, thank you,
Beautifully
Kevin.
said.
That's a
Oh,
perfect way
absolutely.
to impact the ripple. I love it.
Mm.
I
My
love it.
pleasure.
Again, thanks for being with us today, Kevin. This has been such fun having you here on the show. And we will see you next time, folks, on Collaboration Conversations. Bye for now.
Thanks, Regina.